Avoidants regret it, but not loudly, not instantly, and not in a way that gives you the closure you wanted. And that truth is the hook, because it breaks the fantasy most people carry. Most people imagine regret like a movie scene. A tearful apology, a long message, a dramatic return, a clear confession. I was wrong, I miss you, I lost the best thing in my life. And when that doesn't happen, you start doubting yourself. You start thinking, maybe I didn't matter. Maybe they never cared. Maybe I was just easy to replace. But avoidant regret doesn't show up like romance. It shows up like pressure in the chest at midnight. It shows up like restless scrolling. It shows up like checking your profile without speaking to you. It shows up like a quiet ache they refuse to name. The reason it's not loud is because loud regret requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is the exact thing avoidants have trained themselves to avoid. For an avoidant, admitting regret isn't just admitting they miss you. It's admitting they needed you. It's admitting they hurt you. It's admitting they made a mistake, and that admission opens the door to shame. Shame is the emotion they fear more than sadness, because shame feels like exposure. Shame feels like being judged. Shame feels like being trapped in emotional responsibility. So instead of walking into that feeling, their nervous system does what it has always done. It protects them by going cold, by staying silent, by acting like it's fine. This is why avoidant regret is delayed. In the moment of conflict, they often shut down. They might minimize, they might blame. They might say you're too emotional, too intense, asking for too much. Not because your needs were wrong, but because their body feels overwhelmed by closeness and accountability. When they see you hurt, a secure person might lean in. An avoidant often leans out. They want distance to regulate. Distance is how they get control back. And because distance calms them, they confuse that calm with being right. They confuse relief with certainty. They think, I'm better off. They think, this is too much. They think, I needed space. So in the beginning you might see calmness and it looks like they moved on. But calm is not always peace. Sometimes calm is numbness. Here's the part your audience needs to hear. The feeling you wanted them to have immediately is often the feeling they feel later. You process in real time, they postpone. You grieve while the wound is fresh. They distract while the wound is fresh. You cry, you think, you reflect, you try to understand. They work, they scroll, they detach, they stay busy. And the world rewards that behavior. People praise independence. People praise not being dramatic. People praise moving on. But the body doesn't care about praise. The body eventually demands honesty. That's why avoidant regret often arrives in the quiet. At night, distractions lose power. The room is silent. The phone stops buzzing. The mind slows down. And that is when the truth starts tapping them on the shoulder. Not in a clean sentence, but in fragments. Your face when you were disappointed. The moment you stopped begging. The last time you tried to talk and they shut down. The warmth you gave them that they treated like it would always be there. They replay it not because they're suddenly romantic, but because their defenses are tired. Their nervous system can't keep suppressing forever. And because they don't like naming emotion, the regret comes out sideways. It comes out as, I can't sleep. It comes out as irritability. It comes out as boredom with everyone else. It comes out as stalking your social media. It comes out as hovering. It comes out as a random hey, months later like nothing happened. That hey is not nothing. It's often a way to touch the door without opening it. It's a way to see if you're still there without risking rejection. It's a way to calm the ache without facing accountability. This is also why avoidant regret doesn't give closure. Closure requires a full emotional conversation. Closure requires owning the harm. Closure requires saying, I understand what I did. But if they could do that easily, they wouldn't be avoidant. So you don't always get closure. You get signals, you get tests. You get indirect behavior. And that can make you feel crazy because you want clarity, and they're giving you smoke. So the first keynote matters because it frees your audience from the most painful trap, measuring their worth by how loudly someone regrets losing them. Your value is not proven by their apology. Your value is not proven by their tears. Your value was real even when they acted numb. The fact that they didn't fall apart in front of you does not mean you didn't matter. It often means their nervous system couldn't handle the truth in real time. But here is the hard empowerment. Regret is not the same as change. Someone can regret losing you and still be unsafe for you. Someone can miss you and still repeat the same pattern. Someone can feel lonely and still avoid accountability. That's why you must learn to read regret correctly. Regret is often quiet, delayed, indirect. But what you should require is not regret. It's repair. Repair is consistency. Repair is clarity. Repair is accountability. Repair is effort over time. And the deepest closure your audience can take is this: you don't need an avoidant to regret loudly for your leaving to be valid. You don't need their confession to move on. Your closure can be your decision. Your closure can be your boundary. Your closure can be the moment you stop waiting for their regret to prove your worth, and you start treating your peace like the prize. When you're breaking and they look cold, it feels like the cruelest contradiction in the world. You're sitting there with a chest full of pain, trying to explain, trying to connect, trying to be understood, and they're staring back like you're speaking a language they don't want to learn. That coldness is what makes people spiral. It makes you ask, do you have a heart? It makes you feel small. It makes you feel ashamed for having needs. It makes you feel like you cared more. And that is exactly why this keynote matters, because the coldness is not always a lack of love. It's often a defense against shame and emotional exposure. Avoidants are not just afraid of intimacy. They are afraid of what intimacy demands from them. Intimacy demands presence. Intimacy demands emotional responsibility. Intimacy demands that you stay in the room when it's uncomfortable. And for an avoidant nervous system, discomfort doesn't feel like a normal part of love. It can feel like danger. Many avoidants learned early that emotions lead to criticism, conflict, chaos, rejection, or being controlled. So when emotions rise in a relationship, their body doesn't think connection, it thinks threat. And when the body senses threat, it chooses survival. Their survival strategy is shutdown. It's numbness. It's distance. It's becoming logical, detached, calm, even when the situation is emotional. They might cross their arms. They might look away. They might get silent. They might change the subject. They might say, I don't know, repeatedly. They might dismiss your feelings with one sentence. And it lands like ice. But internally, what's often happening is not confidence, it's overwhelm. They are flooded. And when they are flooded, they can't access empathy the way you want them to, because empathy requires nervous system capacity. Now here's the deeper part. Shame is the emotion that fuels that shutdown. When you confront an avoidant with how much you're hurting, a part of them hears you failed. You're not enough. You're the bad person. You're trapped. That may not be what you're saying, but that's what their nervous system translates, and shame is unbearable for someone who learned to protect themselves through emotional distance. Shame is exposure. Shame is being seen in a way they can't control. Shame is vulnerability. So instead of leaning in, they escape. They withdraw emotionally to reduce the shame. This is why they can hurt you and then act like it's no big deal. It's not always because they don't care. It's because caring would force them to feel the shame of what they did. If they fully acknowledged your pain, they'd have to face their role in it. They'd have to feel remorse. They'd have to say, I'm sorry. In a way that's real. They'd have to risk being rejected. They'd have to risk losing the power of distance. And for an avoidant, the risk of that emotional exposure can feel greater than the risk of losing the relationship. That's why they choose coldness. Coldness keeps them in control. Also, coldness is often a form of self-soothing for them. You soothe by talking, connecting, processing. They soothe by minimizing, detaching, creating space. So when conflict happens, you move toward, they move away. You become emotional, they become quiet. Your nervous system seeks closeness to feel safe. Their nervous system seeks distance to feel safe. And that mismatch creates the most painful loop. The more you reach, the more they retreat. The more they retreat, the more you reach. Until you feel like you're begging for basic humanity. This is where the audience needs empowerment, because understanding the reason does not mean accepting the behavior. You can understand why someone shuts down and still decide it's not okay for you. You can have compassion for their pattern and still have standards, because coldness may be a defense, but it still creates damage. It still creates emotional abandonment. It still makes you feel unseen. And emotional abandonment is not just their personality, it's a relational injury. So what do you do with this? You stop trying to melt ice with fire. You stop trying to force warmth out of someone who is shutting down to protect themselves. The more you plead, the more you escalate their threat response. You can't argue an avoidant into empathy when they are flooded. You can't lecture them into presence. You can't explain your way into safety. And the most dangerous thing you can do is to interpret their coldness as a challenge you must overcome by loving harder, because then you train yourself to chase emotional unavailability. Instead, you learn to read coldness as information. Coldness tells you their nervous system is in defense mode. Coldness tells you they are not emotionally available in that moment. Coldness tells you, this person does not have the capacity right now. And then you decide your next move based on self-respect, not desperation. You stop chasing responses. You set a boundary around how you engage. You say less, not more. You pause. You step back. You let reality speak. And here is the key for your viewers. The coldness you saw during conflict doesn't mean you didn't matter. It often means they mattered too much for their nervous system to handle safely. But again, that doesn't mean you stay. Because love that cannot show up when it's hard is not love you can build a stable life on. So the goal is not to prove you're lovable to someone who shuts down. The goal is to choose a relationship where your feelings don't have to beg for a seat at the table. The delayed regret timeline is the moment your audience finally understands why the avoidant looked fine while they were falling apart. Because the avoidant's first emotional response after hurting you or losing you is often relief, and that relief is exactly what makes their regret arrive later, not sooner. This is not about them being heartless. It's about how their nervous system regulates stress. Closeness can feel like pressure to an avoidant, so when the bond breaks or distance appears, their body experiences a temporary calm. The conflict is gone, the emotional intensity is gone, the expectation is gone, the talk is gone, and their system exhales. So in the beginning they can sleep, in the beginning they can act normal, in the beginning they can distract and believe their own story. They tell themselves, I needed space. It wasn't right. They were too emotional. I'm better off. These narratives are not always lies, they are self-protection. They are the mind matching the body's relief. When the body feels calm, the mind wants to justify it. Calm becomes proof they did the right thing. That's why the first phase can look like indifference. But relief is fragile. Relief is not love. Relief is not healing. Relief is simply the nervous system stepping away from what felt threatening. And once the initial relief fades, the quiet begins. Quiet is the real enemy for an avoidant because quiet is where feelings show up. During the day, they can stay busy, they can work, they can scroll, they can fill every moment with stimulation. But eventually life slows down, the room gets silent, the phone stops buzzing, the distractions lose their bite, and that's when the postponed emotion starts knocking. This is the delayed regret timeline. Phase 1 is relief. Phase 2 is restlessness. Phase 3 is haunting. Phase 4 is regret. Restlessness starts when their system looks for the familiar comfort you used to provide and realizes it's gone. Even if they never admitted you comforted them, their body learned it. You were the steady presence. You were the emotional organizer. You were the one who brought warmth, softness, and predictability. So when you're gone, there's a subtle imbalance. They feel bored, uneasy, unsettled. They may not say, miss you. I can't sleep. I feel off. I'm stressed. Because avoidants often don't have the vocabulary for emotional longing. They just feel discomfort. Then haunting begins. Haunting is the night replay. It's the random flashbacks. It's remembering your face, your last message, the moment you went quiet, the moment you stopped trying. Haunting is not romantic nostalgia at first. It's discomfort with self. It's the mind being forced to process what it refused to process when the relationship was alive. Because when you were there, your presence kept the consequences distant. They could always assume access. They could always assume you'd forgive. They could always assume the door was cracked. But now the door feels closed, and that closed door creates a question their mind can't escape. Did I mess up something rare? This is the moment regret begins. Regret is when the avoidant starts revaluing what they lost. They notice what the relationship gave them that the world doesn't give easily. They notice how rare your loyalty was. They notice how you showed up. They notice how you stayed. They notice how you tried to repair. They notice the emotional safety you offered. And they begin to compare. They compare everyone else's shallow attention to your depth. They compare casual connections to real intimacy. They compare temporary comfort to meaningful bond. And that comparison stings because it exposes the cost of what they did. But here's what makes this timeline so painful for your audience. By the time the avoidance regret begins, you are often already tired. You have already processed so much. You have already grieved in real time. You have already rebuilt pieces of yourself. You have already reached your limit. So when they finally start feeling what you felt months ago, it can feel unfair. It can feel like they're late to the truth. And they are. Avoidants are often late to the truth because they delay emotion as a coping strategy. And because regret triggers shame, they rarely show it cleanly. That's why they often come back with crumbs first. A hey, a story reaction, a vague check-in. They are trying to reduce discomfort without fully stepping into accountability. They want relief from regret. But relief is not repair. Relief is just the nervous system trying to calm down. This is why they may seem to miss you but still avoid the hard conversation. They want the bond back without the vulnerability required to rebuild it. The delayed regret timeline matters because it protects your audience from one of the biggest traps, thinking their worth is measured by how fast someone misses them. It's not. Avoidants are slow to feel because they are trained to avoid feeling. Your worth was always real. Their timing was dysfunctional. So if your audience takes one thing from this keynote, it's this: don't let the early relief fool you, and don't let the late regret hypnotize you. Early relief is defense. Late regret is pain. Neither is proof of change. The only proof of change is consistent behavior over time. And the moment you understand the timeline, you stop chasing the avoidance emotions and you start choosing your own peace. Regret shows up in behavior long before it shows up in accountability, and that's why it often looks like watching, hovering, and testing instead of apologizing. When an avoidant starts to regret what they did, their nervous system doesn't automatically move toward vulnerability, it moves toward safety. They want connection, but they don't want exposure. They want reassurance, but they don't want responsibility. They want relief, but they fear the shame that comes with owning the harm. So they reach in the way that feels least risky, not in the way that feels most honest. That's why they watch you first. Watching is safe. Watching lets them feel close without being rejected. Watching lets them gather information without having to take a stance. Watching lets them reduce uncertainty, which is the real discomfort driving them. They view your stories quickly. They check your profile at night. They notice what you post, who you follow, how you look, whether you seem happy. They notice if you're moving on. They notice if you're still sad. They notice if you mention them. They notice if you don't. All of that information answers a question they may not even admit they're asking. Do I still matter to you? And the reason that question is so powerful is because it's not only about you, it's about their identity. If you stop caring, it forces them to face a painful truth, that they lost someone valuable because of their own pattern. That truth triggers shame. Shame is the emotion avoidants run from hardest. So instead of walking into a direct conversation where shame might rise, they do the indirect thing, they hover. Hovering is the avoidance way of touching the bond without committing to repair. It's a small tap on the door. How are you? A meme, a reaction emoji, a hope you're okay. Something that seems casual, almost careless, but it's not careless. It's calculated safety. It allows them to reach without risking rejection. It allows them to test your availability without having to admit they want you. It allows them to calm their nervous system by getting a response. Even one response from you can reduce their discomfort. Even one warm reply can help them sleep. And that's why it's dangerous for you to misread it. Because the moment you respond emotionally, you give them relief. You give them the reassurance they were seeking. You show them the door is still open. You show them your warmth is still accessible. And once they feel that relief, their urgency drops. They don't have to face the full consequence anymore. They don't have to step into accountability yet. They got what they came for, emotional regulation without repair. That is why tests before accountability is the real pattern. Tests are not always malicious. Tests are often fear. They are fear of being rejected, fear of being judged, fear of being exposed, fear of being the bad person, fear of hearing no. So they test with low-risk contact first. They see if you respond. They see how fast you respond. They see if your tone is warm. They see if you ask questions. They see if you're still emotionally invested. They gather data the way a scared person gathers data, indirectly. And you can see the testing behavior in subtle things. They may reach out late at night because that's when they're lonely and when vulnerability feels easier. But it also gives them an excuse if you don't respond. I was just checking in. They may send something funny so they don't have to talk about feelings. They may comment on something random so they don't have to bring up the real issue. They may act like nothing happened to avoid the shame of acknowledging it. They may start liking your posts or viewing your stories consistently, but never speak directly. That inconsistency is not because they don't care, it's because caring creates risk. Now your audience needs to hear this clearly. Watching and hovering can be real regret, but it is not real repair. Regret is an emotion. Repair is an action. Regret can make someone circle your life. Repair makes them come forward and own their choices. Regret makes them miss you. Repair makes them change their behavior. Regret can be intense and still selfish because they may be seeking relief from their own discomfort rather than healing the damage they caused. So how do you know the difference? The difference is directness and consistency. A person who is ready to repair does not stay in the shadows. They don't just watch. They don't just send crumbs. They speak clearly. They take responsibility without blaming you. They acknowledge the harm. They don't rush you. They respect boundaries. They show up over time, not in one emotional moment. They don't demand immediate access. They understand trust must be rebuilt. They are willing to be uncomfortable for the sake of making things right. And this keynote matters because it stops your audience from being hypnotized by crumbs. It stops them from mistaking attention for intention. It stops them from giving their heart away because someone viewed a story or sent a hey. Because the truth is, a hey is not accountability, a meme is not repair, a reaction emoji is not a plan, a late-night check-in is not consistency. If they regret what they did, let that regret push them toward growth, not toward using you as a comfort source. Your role is not to soothe their anxiety. Your role is to protect your peace. You can be kind, but you must be clear. You can be warm, but you must be boundaried. Because the moment you start rewarding tests, you teach them they can have connection without responsibility. And that is the exact pattern that hurt you in the first place. Mistaking relief for repair is the biggest trap because it feels so good in the moment and destroys you slowly afterward. Relief is what you feel when the tension finally breaks, when they text you back, when they show signs of missing you, when the silence ends, when you get a little warmth after weeks of cold. Relief feels like oxygen. It feels like, finally, I'm not crazy. It feels like they do care. It feels like, I knew it. And because you've been living in emotional suspense, that relief can be intoxicating. It can make you forget the reasons you were hurting in the first place. But relief is not repair. Relief is a nervous system event. Repair is a behavioral commitment. Relief is the immediate calming of anxiety. Repair is the slow rebuilding of trust. Relief is them reaching out because they feel lonely, guilty, nostalgic, or uncomfortable. Repair is them showing up consistently even when it's not convenient, even when it requires humility, even when it means facing hard conversations and changing real patterns. The reason people confuse them is because relief looks like progress. When an avoidant returns, even lightly, it feels like movement. A message, a call, a story reaction, a miss you, a sudden softness. It feels like the relationship is finally turning around, and your body responds before your brain can evaluate it. Your heart opens, your dopamine spikes, your hope rushes in. You start imagining the future again. You start rewriting the past. You start telling yourself, maybe it wasn't that bad, because you're hungry for peace. And that hunger is exactly what keeps people trapped. Because avoidants are often skilled at providing relief without providing repair, not always intentionally. But their nervous system knows how to restore comfort quickly without stepping into full accountability. They can say the right words. They can sound emotional for a moment. They can be sweet. They can be present for a day. They can give you just enough to calm you down, just enough to make you stop leaving, just enough to pull you back into availability. And once you're back, once the danger of losing you passes, their urgency drops. Their anxiety settles. The pressure of closeness returns, and then they pull away again. That cycle is the hallmark of relief without repair. It's the pattern of returning to calm themselves, not to rebuild with you. Here's how you can recognize it. Relief sounds vague. I miss you. I've been thinking. I don't want to lose you. Relief focuses on feelings, not responsibility. Relief avoids specifics. It rarely includes a clear plan. It rarely includes ownership of what they did without excuses. Relief tries to skip the hard part and go straight to closeness. Relief wants the benefits of connection without the discomfort of accountability. Repair sounds different. Repair is clear. Repair includes acknowledgement. I hurt you when I disappeared. I shut down instead of communicating. I made you carry the relationship. Repair includes ownership. Not I'm sorry but, not I'm sorry you felt, not I was stressed. Real ownership. I chose this pattern and it harmed you. Repair includes a plan. I want to rebuild slowly. I'm willing to do therapy or work on my attachment. I want to have consistent communication. I understand if you don't trust me yet. Repair respects time. Repair doesn't rush. Repair can tolerate your caution without punishing you for it. And the most important difference is consistency. Relief can happen in one night. Repair takes weeks, months, and proof. Now, why is this so important for your audience? Because when you confuse relief for repair, you reopen your heart to the same wound. You let them back into your nervous system without changing the conditions that created the pain. You start giving access again. You start being emotionally available again. You start relaxing your boundaries again. And because you're relieved, you stop protecting yourself. You stop observing. You stop requiring clarity. You stop asking, is this different? And you start asking, how do I keep this? That shift makes you vulnerable. It puts you back in the position of chasing stability. It makes you work for consistency again. It makes you accept crumbs again because you're afraid the relief will disappear. And it usually does, because nothing was repaired. The avoidant got what they needed: regulation, reassurance, proof of access, and then the old fear of intimacy returns. This is why people say they came back and then disappeared again. That's relief, not repair. So the lesson is not to become cold. The lesson is to become wise. If they return, don't punish them. Don't play games. But also don't hand them the keys to your heart because your anxiety calmed down. Calm is not proof. Words are not proof. One emotional moment is not proof. Proof is time. Proof is effort. Proof is consistency. Proof is seeing them show up when it's not easy. And here's the most empowering part. You are allowed to enjoy the relief without surrendering your standards. You can feel happy they reached out without rushing back into the same dynamic. You can accept an apology without resuming intimacy. You can talk without giving full access. You can be kind without becoming available for inconsistency. Because your peace is not something they get to borrow whenever they feel lonely. Your heart is not a place they get to visit for comfort and leave again when pressure rises. If they want you, they must rebuild. And rebuilding requires repair, not relief. When your audience learns this, they stop falling for the same pattern in a new outfit. They stop being hypnotized by, "I miss you." They start watching what comes after, "I miss you." And that is the moment they regain control of their life, because they stop chasing relief and start demanding real change. The final power shift is this: the only proof that their regret is real is consistency over time, and their regret is not your job to fix. That sentence alone frees people, because so many hearts have been trapped in the same exhausting role, emotional caretaker for someone who keeps avoiding accountability. You were never just a partner. You became the regulator. You became the one who calmed the storms. You became the one who translated silence. You became the one who held the relationship together with patience and hope. And when an avoidant starts to show regret, your instincts wake up again. You want to soothe. You want to make it okay. You want to help them process their feelings. You want to finally get the relationship back on track. But that instinct, as beautiful as it is, can become the very thing that keeps you stuck. Because avoidant regret often appears as discomfort, and discomfort makes them reach. They feel lonely, guilty, restless, unsure. They hover. They test. They send that hey. They show you softness for a moment, and the loving person in you wants to reward that softness with full warmth, because you've been starving for it. You think, if I respond perfectly, we'll be okay. You think, if I'm gentle, they'll stay. You think, if I don't push too hard, I won't scare them away. And without realizing it, you slide back into the old role, adjusting yourself to fit their avoidance. That's why this final keynote matters. It teaches you to stop measuring love by emotion and start measuring love by behavior. Consistency is the only proof. Not messages, not tears, not late-night confessions, not jealousy, not story views. Consistency means they show up again and again in the boring moments, the ordinary moments, the moments where there's no adrenaline. Consistency means communication becomes stable, not intense and then silent. Consistency means effort doesn't spike and disappear. Consistency means they keep their word. Consistency means they don't punish you for having boundaries. Consistency means they can tolerate closeness without disappearing. Consistency means they act like a partner, not like a visitor. Regret is easy to feel when they are scared of losing you. Consistency is hard to maintain when they feel safe again. That's why consistency is the true test. If their regret is real, it will survive time, it will survive your slower pace, it will survive your boundaries, it will survive the discomfort of rebuilding trust. Real regret doesn't demand instant closeness. Real regret respects the fact that healing takes time. Now, the second half of the power shift is the part that changes someone's life. Their regret is not your job to fix. This is where so many people get trapped. You see their pain and you feel responsible. You think, if they're suffering, I should help. You think, if I ignore them, I'm cruel. You think, if I don't respond, I'm punishing. But listen carefully, you can be compassionate without being available. You can care without giving access. You can wish someone well without reopening the door to the pattern that broke you. Because their regret is a consequence, and consequence is what teaches growth. If you immediately soothe the consequence, you remove the teacher. You remove the discomfort that pushes them to change. You give them relief without requiring repair. And if they can get relief without repair, their nervous system learns the old rule again. I can avoid and still keep connection. That is exactly what created your pain. So the healthiest thing you can do is allow their regret to belong to them. Let them sit with it. Let them learn from it. Let them take responsibility for it. You do not have to become the emotional nurse for someone who wounded you. You do not have to talk them through the guilt they earned. You do not have to hold their hand while they process what they refused to process when you needed them. That may sound harsh, but it's actually the most loving thing for both of you, because growth requires ownership. And here is how you apply this in a way that is calm, not cruel. You slow everything down. You don't let one emotional message reset the relationship. You don't rush into intimacy. You keep your life moving. You keep your standards clear. You make them show you change through consistent behavior. You watch how they respond when you don't give immediate access. Do they respect you or do they pressure you? Do they stay steady or do they disappear again? Do they become accountable or do they become defensive? Do they make it about your boundaries being too much? Or do they understand your boundaries are the result of what they did? Because an avoidant who is truly growing will not be offended by your caution. They will be grateful you're even open. They will understand trust must be rebuilt. They will not rush you. They will not punish you. They will not act entitled to your heart. They will show up like an adult. And if they cannot do that, then the regret you're seeing is not the kind of regret that can build a relationship. It's the kind of regret that wants comfort. And you are not here to be someone's comfort when they're lonely and someone's stranger when intimacy is required. So the final power shift gives your audience the ending they deserve. It tells them, stop chasing proof of regret. Stop waiting for the perfect apology. Stop trying to make them understand. Instead, let your peace be the proof. Let your standards be the proof. Let your boundaries be the proof. Because when you stop trying to fix their regret, you stop abandoning yourself. And that is the moment everything changes. Whether they return or not, you win. Because you are no longer living at the mercy of someone else's emotional timing. You are living in the certainty of your own worth.